Welcome back to our YouTube channel, The Book Digest. In today's episode, we're diving into a powerful and practical summary of Adam Grant's originals. It's this fascinating look at a core puzzle of creativity and innovation. I mean, think about it for a second. We all look up to original thinkers, right? The people who really move the world forward. But so many of us have these great ideas that just never go anywhere. Why is that? Well, today we're going to get to the bottom of that exact question. So here's what we've got on tap. We're going to tackle the big myths about originality head on. We'll look at how originals really think about risk, the whole myth of that one perfect idea, the surprising power of procrastination, yep, you heard that right, and how you can actually get people to listen to your ideas. By the end of this, you're going to see that being original isn't some magic trait. It's something any of us can learn. Okay, so let's jump right into that big puzzle. According to Grant, the reason originality is so rare, it's not because we lack good ideas or creativity. Nope. It's because we're up against all these psychological and social barriers that just stop us in our tracks. But here's the good news. The book shows us that originality is basically a set of strategies we can all learn to get past those hurdles. All right, let's get into the first and maybe the biggest myth of them all. It's this idea that to be an original, you have to be this fearless, all-in kind of risk taker. You know the trope, right? The founder who dramatically quits their job, puts their life savings on the line, and just risks everything for their one big idea. But the reality that Grant lays out in the book, it's completely different. It turns out successful originals aren't reckless gamblers at all. They're actually surprisingly cautious. They don't take that crazy leap of faith. Instead, they do something much smarter. They build what's called a risk portfolio. And get this, the data totally backs this up. Research in the book found that entrepreneurs who held onto their day jobs while starting their new thing, they had a 33% lower chance of failing than the ones who quit everything right away. I mean, that is a huge difference. It completely flips that whole heroic narrative on its head. And you see this play out with some of the biggest names out there. Take Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. We all know the story of him selling shoes from the trunk of his car, but what we often forget is that he kept his full-time job as an accountant for 5 years after starting the company. The founders of Warby Parker, same deal. They didn't quit their day jobs until they knew for sure the business was actually going to work. So this is what the risk portfolio is all about. By having that safety net in one area of your life, like a steady paycheck, you're actually giving yourself the freedom to be bolder and more creative somewhere else. Security doesn't kill originality. It actually makes it possible. Okay, so that leads us perfectly into the next big myth about creative genius. We have this romantic idea that originals get struck by lightning with one perfect, world-changing idea. That eureka moment. But the data tells a totally different story. It turns out, originality is really a numbers game. The most creative people in almost every field, we're talking Shakespeare, Beethoven, even Edison, they were also the most prolific. They produced a ton of work, a massive volume, and a lot of it was just okay. Some of it was downright bad. Their masterpieces were just a tiny sliver of everything they created. So what does that actually mean for us? Well, the problem usually isn't that we don't have enough ideas. We probably have plenty. The real challenge, the place where we all get stuck, is in figuring out which of those ideas are actually worth pursuing. You can think of it like a pipeline. We generate all these ideas, but then we hit this bottleneck of trying to pick the right one. And Grant points out that we, the creators, are often terrible judges of our own work. We're either way too in love with a bad idea, or we're too scared and underestimate what we'd lose by not trying a good one. All right, this next idea. This might be my favorite one in the whole book because it's so counterintuitive. We are constantly told that procrastination is the absolute enemy of getting things done. But Grant makes this compelling case that when you use it the right way, it can actually be a super powerful tool for creativity. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about just putting things off and watching Netflix. He makes a really important distinction. He calls it strategic procrastination. This is where you start a project, get the main problem stuck in your head, and then you purposefully step away from it. This gives your brain time to incubate the idea, to let it simmer and make all these cool connections in the background that you'd totally miss if you just tried to power through to the end. And again, there's actual data on this. One study in the book is fascinating. It found that students who were told to procrastinate a little bit on a creative task, their solutions were rated 28% more creative than the students who got started on it immediately. It's all about finding that perfect middle ground, that sweet spot. And a really powerful example of this in action is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. He'd been kicking around the main themes for months, but he was still tweaking and writing the draft late into the night before the march. And it was that procrastination, that refusal to finalize it too early, that gave him the freedom and the mental space to improvise the most famous parts of that speech live, right on stage. Incredible. Okay, so let's say you've done all this. You've managed your risk, you've got a bunch of ideas, you've even picked one you think is a winner. Now comes what can be the hardest part, getting other people on board. Because truly original ideas, by their very nature, are unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things tend to make people pretty resistant. This is where strategy is just absolutely crucial. Grant lays out a few proven ways to do this. And one of the most powerful is, believe it or not, to lead with your idea's weaknesses. I know, it sounds crazy, but admitting the flaws right away builds trust and actually makes you sound more credible. It's also super important to connect your new idea to something people already know, and to remember that your peers are often a much better audience for a new idea than your manager might be. So as we start to pull all these threads together, we get to the book's real core message, and it's a super empowering one. This idea of being an original. It isn't some identity you're born with. It's not a personality trait. It's a practice. It's a bunch of choices you make and a set of skills you can actually develop. It's all about learning how to handle risk, how to come up with and pick good ideas, how to time your moves, and how to get other people to listen. And every single one of those things can be learned. So what this really means is we have to ditch this myth that originals are some kind of superheroes. They feel fear, they feel doubt, they worry about failing just like everybody else. The only difference is they've figured out strategies to manage those feelings and to act in spite of them. And that brings us to the final, and I think the most hopeful idea in the entire book. That gap between the people who actually change the world and the people who don't, it's way, way smaller than the whole creative genius myth wants us to believe. It's not about being born a genius. It's about learning the right moves to close that gap. So I want to leave you with a question to mull over. After hearing all of this, what's just one small thing you can do this week to move forward on an original idea you've been sitting on? Maybe it's finally starting that side project, while keeping your day job, of course. Or maybe it's just sharing a half-formed idea with a friend you trust. What's that one small step? And that's our breakdown of Adam Grant's originals. I really hope it's given you a new way to think about your own ideas and your own creativity. Thanks so much for watching the Book Digest, and we'll see you in the next one.